Today, we're cracking open a financial tool most of us probably use almost every day, the credit card.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to really get under the hood, we've pulled together info from a few key places. We've got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, that's the CFPB, the U.S. government agency looking out for fair treatment.
Right, a really solid source for the rules and rights.
Then there's a YouTube video from Mark Tilbury. It's mostly about investing, but he makes some good points about, the basics of financial health that lead into that.
Kind of the foundation.
Exactly. And finally, a podcast episode called Credit Cards, Navigating the Double-Edged Sword from Your Financial Compass.
The title really says it all, doesn't it? Credit cards are just so woven into how we spend. Super convenient, obviously. But, like the podcast says, there's that sharp edge. They're crucial for building credit history, which, honestly, affects way more than just getting loans later on. But yeah, if you mishandle them, it can get expensive fast.
Right. So, our mission here today is to pull out the most important stuff from these sources. We want to give you a clearer picture of how these cards work, how to manage them well, and make choices that actually help your finances.
Yeah, moving beyond just, swipe and forget.
We want to equip you with useful knowledge.
And these different sources give us different angles, which is great.
Mhm.
The CFPB gives us the regulatory baseline, your rights.
The official stuff.
Yeah. Tilbury connects it back to bigger picture financial health, like investing, and your financial compass. That gives us the real practical day-to-day strategies.
Okay, let's get into some specifics then. The CFPB talks about when the terms on your credit card can actually change. It's not like the companies can just change things whenever they want, is it?
No, not exactly. What's important to understand is, yes, they can change terms, especially for future purchases, but they can't just, spring it on you out of the blue. The CFPB makes it clear that for significant changes, they generally have to give you 45 days notice.
45 days.
Okay. Yeah. So it really highlights why you need to actually read those notices and statements they send you.
Yeah.
Stay informed about how your agreement might be changing.
Right. That heads up gives you time to, I don't know, maybe change how you use the card or shop around if you need to.
Precisely.
Okay, now, interest rates, the cost of borrowing. The CFPB gets into how those are usually calculated too.
Yes. And this is where understanding the mechanics can really save you some money. Most cards calculate interest daily.
Daily. Wow.
Yeah. So the CFPB's takeaway is pretty straightforward. The faster you pay down your balance, even making partial payments, the less interest you'll end up paying overall. It's less about hitting the due date exactly and more about reducing the amount of time that balance is sitting there racking up interest.
So paying a bit extra here and there during the month could actually make a difference.
It absolutely could over time.
The CFPB also talks about different kinds of rates, fixed versus variable APR.
Right. They distinguish between fixed APR, which, sounds stable, and variable APR, which can move up or down based on market rates, like the prime rate.
So you need to know which one you're signing up for.
Definitely. When you're comparing cards, check if it's fixed or variable. It tells you about the potential stability or maybe instability of how much you'll be charged.
Makes sense. Now, the CFPB uses a bunch of specific terms. Let's just quickly clarify a few key ones. Annual percentage rate, APR. What's that in simple terms?
APR is basically the yearly cost of borrowing money on that card. It's the main interest rate, but shown as an annual figure.
Got it. And balance transfer, we hear that term a lot.
A balance transfer is just moving debt from one credit card to another one. Often people do this to get a lower interest rate, maybe like a 0% introductory offer. Your financial compass actually gives some good examples of this.
Right, a way to try and pay off debt cheaper. Okay, credit balance. That sounds like a mistake in your favor.
Pretty much. It just means you paid more than you owed, so the card company actually owes you money. You'll have a negative balance.
Okay. What about the daily periodic rate? That sounds technical.
It is a bit, but it's important. It's the daily interest rate they use for those calculations we mentioned. They usually get it by taking your APR and dividing it by 365.
Yeah.
That's the rate they multiply your outstanding balance by each day.
So the APR is the big yearly number, but the daily periodic rate is what's actually doing the work day to day.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
And the grace period, that's the important window, right?
Absolutely crucial. The grace period is that time between when your billing cycle ends and when your payment is due. If you pay your entire balance off by the due date during that grace period, you usually won't pay any interest at all.
Like a free short-term loan, basically.
Pretty much. Both the CFPB and your financial compass really stress using this period wisely.
Definitely. Okay, just interest rate on its own. How's that different from APR?
In everyday talk, people often use them interchangeably. Technically, though, the APR can sometimes include certain fees on top of the interest rate itself, so it's a bit broader. But for practical purposes, yeah, the APR is the main annual cost you need to look at.
Gotcha. And those pre-screened credit card offers we get in the mail.
Those are just offers sent out because the card company thinks you probably meet their basic criteria based on, like, credit bureau information. Doesn't guarantee approval, though.
Right. And finally, unauthorized use. Hopefully never happens, but...
Exactly. That's just any charge on your card that you didn't make or approve.
Yeah.
And the CFPB makes it clear you have strong protections against liability for those.
Okay, let's talk more about those protections. The CFPB also points out some common problems people run into with cards and, importantly, what rights you have.
Yeah, it's good to know you're not just stuck if something goes wrong. Common issues the CFPB mentions are things like getting a surprisingly low credit limit, maybe getting charged interest even when you thought you paid in full, or having a purchase declined when it shouldn't have been.
Frustrating stuff. So what are some key rights the CFPB highlights?
Well, a big one is that they generally can't just raise the interest rate on your existing balance unless you're like 60 days late on a payment. That provides some protection against sudden spikes on debt you already have.
Okay, that's significant.
Another key thing is about billing errors. If you dispute a charge on your bill, the card issuer has a set time frame, usually up to 90 days or 2 billing cycles, to investigate and sort it out.
Good to have a deadline for them.
Definitely. And crucially, if your card is lost or stolen and you report it before any fraud happens, you're typically off the hook. You usually have zero liability for those unauthorized charges. Even if they happen before you report it, your liability is often limited, like $50.
That's really reassuring. And if we do need to take action, the CFPB has resources.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Their website has info on the exact steps for disputing a charge, how to properly cancel a card if you need to, and even guidance on getting refunds from merchants for things bought with a credit card if there's an issue with the goods or services. Really practical stuff.
Great. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and look at your financial compass. They break down the different types of credit cards. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, right?
Not at all. They group them by what they mainly offer. Rewards cards are probably the most common category people think about.
And those come in different styles.
That's right. They talk about cashback cards first. Like the Chase Freedom Unlimited is an example they give, offering maybe 1.5% cash back on everything.
Simple enough.
Yeah, and they show how it adds up. Someone spending, say, $2,000 a month on a card that gives 2% back, that's $40 a month, nearly $500 a year, real money back.
Not bad for spending you'd do anyway. Then there are travel cards.
Right. For people who prioritize points or miles for travel, they mention the American Express Gold Card, known for giving extra points on things like dining and groceries. Those points can then be used for flights, hotels, that kind of thing, turning spending into trips.
Makes sense if you travel a lot. What about those balance transfer cards we mentioned earlier? Your Financial Compass gives an example.
They do. They mention cards like the Citi Simplicity, which has offered these really long 0% APR periods, sometimes up to 21 months, for balance transfers.
21 months, wow.
Yeah, and they run the numbers. If you have like $5,000 in debt on a card charging 20% APR, moving it to a 0% card for that long could save you potentially around $1,000 in interest. It's a strategy to really attack the principal balance without interest piling up immediately.
Sounds like a powerful tool if you have high interest debt. Then there are secured cards. What's the deal with those?
Secured cards are mainly for people trying to build or rebuild credit. Like the Discover It secured card, you usually have to put down a cash deposit, maybe $200, which then becomes your credit limit.
So the bank has security.
Exactly. Your Financial Compass shares a nice little story about someone, John, who used one, paid on time consistently for maybe 8 months, and eventually they increased his limit and even gave him his deposit back. It's like a stepping stone to regular credit cards.
That's a cool success story. And lastly, student cards.
Yeah, tailored for college students. Cards like the Discover It Student Card often have rewards focused on student spending, maybe rotating categories like gas or restaurants or cash back for good grades sometimes. They help students start building that credit history early, plus maybe get some rewards.
So choosing the right card really depends on your goals and your current credit situation.
Totally.
Now, your financial compass also tackles some really common questions, like how many credit cards should a person actually have?
Right, that's a big one. Their take is basically there's no single right answer. But for most people, 2 or 3 well-managed cards are probably enough. The focus should be on using them responsibly, not just collecting plastic. Quality over quantity.
Easier to manage fewer cards well, I guess.
Exactly.
Another question. Should you close old credit cards you don't really use anymore?
Generally, their advice is no, try to keep them open.
Really?
Because the length of your credit history, how long you had credit accounts open and in good standing, is a pretty big factor in your credit score. Closing an old card shortens your average account age.
Ah, okay.
They do suggest maybe using those old cards for a small purchase every few months, just to keep them active so the issuer doesn't close them on you. It keeps that history alive.
Good tip. Let that history work for you. Okay, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of managing cards well. Your financial compass really hammers home understanding APR and interest. We touched on it, but what are their key points?
They really reinforce that crucial idea. Interest only hits if you carry a balance past the due date. Pay the statement balance in full each month, and you typically pay 0 interest.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Use the grace period.
Exactly. Use that grace period, usually 21 to 25 days, as your interest-free window. And they also remind us, like the CFPB, that interest is usually calculated daily on whatever balance is left after the grace period ends. So paying in full is best, but paying as much as you can, as early as you can, always helps minimize the cost.
Makes sense. Another big thing they stress is managing your credit limit. This hits your credit score directly, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They emphasize keeping your credit utilization low. That's the amount you owe compared to your total credit limit. Ideally, you want to keep that below 30% across all your cards.
So if you have a $10,000 limit, try not to owe more than $3,000 at any given time.
Exactly. Lenders see lower utilization as less risky. They also strongly advise never going over your credit limit. That can trigger fees and really hurt your score. It's about showing you can manage the credit you're given.
Right. And then there's the feature they call potentially dangerous cash advances.
Yeah, they give a strong warning here. Cash advances, taking cash out using your credit card, usually have a much higher APR than regular purchases.
Higher interest. Okay.
And critically, there's typically no grace period. Interest starts piling up from day one.
Ouch.
Plus, there are often extra fees just for taking the advance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, their advice is basically avoid cash advances unless it's an absolute dire emergency.
Definitely sounds like something to stay away from if possible. Okay, so what actions do they suggest we take? How do we build these good habits?
They offer a pretty clear action plan. First, review your current cards. Know the terms, APRs, fees, rewards. Are they still right for you?
Take stock.
Yeah. Second, set up automatic payments. At least for the minimum, but ideally for the full statement balance. This prevents missed payments, which are terrible for your score and trigger fees and interest. Echoes the CFPB point about paying down quickly.
Good safety net.
Third, track your spending. Keep an eye on that utilization. Stay under 30%. Fourth, just avoid cash advances. Really.
Look at it, avoid.
And fifth, check your credit reports regularly. Make sure everything's accurate. Look for any signs of fraud. You can usually get free reports annually.
All very concrete steps. Now, let's quickly connect this back to Mark Tilbury's video on investing. Yeah. How does managing credit cards well fit into bigger financial goals like that?
Well, Tilbury's focus is investing, building wealth, but his underlying message is that you need a solid financial foundation first. And responsible credit card use is a huge part of that foundation.
How so?
By paying on time, keeping utilization low, you build a good credit score. And that good score makes you look better to lenders. It unlocks access to other financial tools, like mortgages or loans for maybe starting a business, often with better interest rates.
Ah, so good credit saves you money elsewhere, freeing up cash.
Exactly. It frees up capital that you could then potentially use for investing or other goals. So good credit card habits aren't just about avoiding debt problems. They're about enabling future opportunities.
It's all connected. Okay, let's wrap this up. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
I think the big message is that credit cards are powerful tools. They can be really beneficial. But that power demands understanding and careful management. You got to know your card's terms, be really disciplined about paying your balances ideally in full, and stay far away from expensive traps like cash advances unless there's absolutely no other choice.
Right, it comes back to that double-edged sword idea. You want to be the one wielding it wisely, not getting cut by it.
Exactly. And the good news is there are great resources out there. We definitely encourage you to check out the CFPB's website for all the details on rights and regulations, and look into resources like Your Financial Compass for ongoing practical tips on managing money, including credit.
Absolutely. So here's something to chew on after listening. We know credit cards offer convenience, maybe rewards, but also carry the risk of debt. Thinking about your own financial situation, how can you strategically use them, or maybe choose not to use them in certain ways, to really maximize those benefits while keeping the downsides firmly in check?
It really just boils down to being informed, being intentional, and ultimately taking control.
Well said. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.